corporatizing the entire planet. Being angry doesn't seem to change much. You know, being angry and waking up in an angry world seems to really give them the power over you. And if you want to say there is an us and a them, eventually I believe that many of us have moved on to the part that it's all of us, and we have the responsibility of choosing whether we are going to live reactionary, whether we're going to live angry at the state of the world, if we are going to just scream back at the powers that be that, no, we do not like what you're doing, and that's fine. You know, doing that in an activist form and whatnot, allowing ourselves to blow off some steam is one thing. We see right now, I see the protests that are going on in Turkey and in Hong Kong and whatnot, and I think that's a beautiful expression of the human condition when we gather together to share our unhappiness with the status quo, so to speak. And with that being said, though, on an individual basis, on a day-to-day basis, if we are angry all the time, we need to ask ourselves, is that the way we want to live? We need to ask ourselves, am I just feeding the powers that be? You know, many of us talk about, well, let's just say it, people call it the Illuminati. I don't know if that's the right term, but let's say the Illuminati, the occult practitioners, the global elite, et cetera, who feed off of our energy, but yet we are waking up angry and we're giving them our energy and thinking about them constantly and living fearfully and living reactionally and doing everything we can to resist them within our lives, yet by doing so, we give them our power. Is that any way to move through to the next level of awareness? Is that any way that we are actually going to succeed in really removing the I don't want to say removing the negative, because polarity is a part of life, but removing the corporatization of the planet, removing the power of the corporate elite? I find that if you are speaking on a metaphysical level, if you're speaking on a level of like attracts like, if you're speaking on an occult and or a magical level, that by sharing and thinking and living angrily, you are giving them your power. You know, I remember back in 2001, George Bush says, "We will not allow these terrorists to affect us. We will go on living and la 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 la." You know, we are going to show them that we're not going to let them win by changing the way that we live. But yet, what has happened? What has happened? You know, 9/11 conspiracy aside, the whole idea that the United States was going to move on and not allow it to affect our freedom has gone completely the opposite. We've moved on with the Patriot Act, with the NSA, with the reduction of civil rights and whatnot. Self-imposed prison through the state. Now, are we doing the same thing? Are we going to do the same thing on an individual level? Are we going to remove our natural-born freedoms? Are we going to imprison ourselves in this state of unhappiness and anger on a day-to-day basis because we are unhappy with the way the global elites have corporatized and have snagged, stolen, and really hoarded power and money? It's one thing to be aware of it. It's one thing to study it. It's one thing to do what we can to change the dynamic of the planet. I believe that's very important. I don't believe that we must throw our hands up in the air. I don't believe that we should comply when we can, you know, unless they're going to throw you in jail. I mean, well, if you're an activist, you get thrown in jail overnight. That's one thing. But I mean, we don't want to do anything that's going to take us out of the workings of creating change, is what I mean. So do we really want to put ourselves in the self-imposed prison of anger and resistance and whatnot on an individual day-to-day level. Something to think about. Again, my comment would be that, like, Michael Murphy had mentioned earlier, that, we want to live our lives. We want to be positive and be hopeful and be inspirational and be empowered, empowered in knowing that we can create change, empowered in knowing that we are creating change, empowered in taking action to create change, but not to live in fear, not to live in anger, not to live in disrespect for ourselves or our fellow humankind. Something that we will all really must consider at this point of our history. History is changing. It's changing every single day. We see growth and setback. We see growth in civil rights. We see setback in human rights. We see growth in human rights. We see setback in civil rights. It's the ebb and flow of change. And as this ebb and flow changes, are we going to allow the minutia of one particular aspect to change our inspiration to keep moving forward? And I say no. I say no, we must continue moving forward. I say that we must continue remaining inspired and to know that we are going to be able to create change, that we are creating change just by changing our mind. So let's think about that. Many of us who are on this path, many of us who are on this, how shall we say, this chosen path, I believe it has become our responsibility. I believe those of us that have said, I'm going to do everything I can to change myself, I'm going to do everything I can to expose corruption, I'm going to do everything I can to create change on the planet, I'm going to run for office, I'm going to not to vote for that person, or I'm not going to vote at all and be a part of that paradigm. I have taken action. I am implementing that in my daily life. We have, many of us, come up with, how shall we say, obstacles in dealing with living on the planet. And I feel that much of that comes from something within us. I feel that many of us have that, what was the name of that novel? A Stranger Living in a Strange Land. Here we are, we're on this planet. We don't quite understand what's going on. And, I've been there. I can have moments throughout my day where I'm like, what is that all about? But we have this struggle with living on this I don't want to say self-imposed, but when I say self-imposed in this next comment, I mean collectively imposed. Let's put it that way. The collective has allowed this control matrix to be upon our earth, this corrupt financial/political paradigm matrix is really gripping our planet and sucking our resources dry, whether it be the natural resources or our financial resources. And with that, many of us do have a difficult time living on this planet. I see that many people have moved on to create collectives, off-grid collectives, which is a wonderful thing. If you can do it, that's fantastic. I see many of us have fallen prey to addictions or mental health situations. I see many of us have become homeless, or all of the above, that I mentioned earlier. It has become a struggle to live on this earth. One of my favorite memes that is on Facebook is, the earth is the only planet I know that you have to pay rent to exist, or you have to pay to live on the planet. You must participate in this economic paradigm in order to have the things that were once free to everyone, free to build a hut or a home somewhere under a tree, free to pick the fruits that grow naturally. Life was free at one time or another. We forget that. We forget. And I'm not saying that I want to go back to that. I firmly enjoy technology. I firmly enjoy having light, and I enjoy having air conditioning, and I enjoy, of course, I don't want to say I need, but the tool of technology is important to the work that I do. But with that being said, it is a struggle for us. It is not something that is natural, and I think that's the key. Is that we are feeling ourselves being tugged away from our natural born rights. We are feeling ourselves being torn from our natural way of being, our natural beingness, our ability to live in peace with ourselves and in peace with one another. It's very difficult. It's very difficult. And when you're dealing when you're living in a place where there is conflict, where there's strife, where there's war, all the more harder it becomes to exist on this planet. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is I want us to hopefully have the motive or the inspiration to create that change, to take the steps that are needed to change this really poisonous and obtrusive paradigm that the global elite have created for us, or that we've allowed the global elite to create for us. Living on the earth is not something that should be difficult. Living on this earth is not something that we should have to struggle, should not be a struggle, is not a struggle. It's not a struggle. But we've allowed ourselves to be pulled into these paradigms, these corporate and controlling paradigms that have made it all but impossible to not be controlled and to struggle. So once we get a grasp on this idea that, living on the earth should be free. Maybe we got it wrong. Maybe this whole idea of this economic system, or any economic system, I'm not going to say one is better than the other. I'm not going to say capitalism is better than communism, or communism is better than socialism, or socialism is better than bartering or whatnot. But I do believe that as we continue down this path, we're unfortunately going to keep replacing one that doesn't work with the other, and it isn't until we have outgrown the idea that we must have some type of economic paradigm that we are not really going to create any type of change. I see many of my friends, including myself, don't get me wrong, socialism is probably better than capitalism, probably. But is it going to answer all the questions? Is it going to create all the solutions that are needed? It just seems that we're bouncing back and forth from different economic paradigm to different economic paradigm, and we're not going to be able to change anything. The same goes with those of us who are bouncing from political party to political party and creating new political parties. And I'm a Democrat today. I'm a Libertarian today. I'm a progressive today. I'm a Republican today. I'm an anarchist today. I'm a socialist today. And this whole idea that changing a political party is going to make your life better, or that any particular party is going to make your life better, is truly what we say, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. I myself had thought of myself somewhat of a libertarian socialist, however. But even within that, I find such insanity and within the folks that are representing and the folks that are running. And I'm like, really, you're not changing anything. You're just doing the same thing over and over again and thinking you're going to get a different response. You're not changing anything. What needs to change is the system. What needs to change is the system, not putting Band-Aids on it, not voting for the other guy, not creating a new party to usurp the power from the Democrats or the Republicans or the Libertarians. It's the whole idea that we're going to change the system by playing in it is somewhat insane to me. And I'm not saying we need to have a French Revolution. We're not going to, storm the Bastille or anything. I don't see that as being a solution. But I do feel if we're really going to create change, we need to change ourselves. We must decide that we are no longer going to fall for the same thing over and 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 over again. A new party shows up, that's nice. A new candidate shows up, that's nice. A new economic paradigm shows up, that's nice. But is it changing anything? What are we doing? What are we actually doing to create the change needed in order for all of us to benefit from life on this planet? What are we actually doing? When we decide that we are no longer going to participate, and when we decide that we are turning our back on this current system, that's when we will begin to see the beginning of change. Not change, but the beginning of change. When you decide and that you're going to turn your back on political parties, you will begin to see the freedom within your own personal life that you did not have before. You will no longer be swayed to vote for any particular person because your party votes for them. You will no longer be swayed to compromise on specific issues that are important to you because your particular party happens to toe that particular reasoning when it comes to that issue. You're going to find out that when you turn your back on the whole idea of political parties, that perhaps maybe an individual voice has more power to create change than any party does. And that's one example, the political party system. The economic system, here's another one. The economic system, when we finally let go of the idea that the more money we have, the more power we have, the more happy we're going to be, it's going to change your life. And as you begin to change your life, you're going to change the lives of people around you. We must start embracing alternative values. And I don't mean alternative like underground, hippie, anarchist, libertarian, truther, whatever. I'm talking alternative other than what is now being misconstrued as logic. Yes, being misconstrued as logic. These alternative values come from your spirit, come from within you. They're not being thrust upon you by society or by those that you perhaps have respect for. Don't get me wrong. I have lots of people in my life that inspire me, that I look up to. I don't want to be them. I mean, there are many people that have inspired me to do the work that I do today, but I do not want to be them. I don't have to agree with everything that they've done, and I do not need to align with their values. So when I say alternative values, what am I talking about? Alternative values for me, one example, a very important example, which was one that many of us probably struggle, is the idea of status. And what I mean by status, the status quo dictates what societal status means. If you are playing that game of, I need to have that car to be cool, or I need to have that phone to be cool, I need to have that house to be cool, I need to have that clothes to be cool, I need to have that job to be cool, I need to have that haircut to be cool. Those are societally imposed values. Even within movements like ours, even within movements like the consciousness movement, the Global Illumination Council movement, the Revolution Radio movement, the Truther movement, whatever it is, somehow we always fall into that trap of If I'm not like them, they're not going to like me. We somehow fall into a new quote unquote matrix of how we need to be. I say, pshaw to all of them. Get rid of them. Throw them in the garbage. I don't want to be a truther. I don't want to be a illuminationist or a revolutionist or a libertarian or an anarchist. I don't want to be a consciousness pioneer. I want to be, like the name of the show, just Bernard. I'm just Bernard. And you are just fill in the blank, whatever your name is. Just you. Your values. What works for you? Let's let that idea that I'm not a good activist because I don't hate Monsanto, or I'm not a good activist because I forgot to put that can in the recycling bin, or I'm not a good activist because I still have fluoridated water in my home. You can't do everything at once. And I must say that alternative values means doing the best that you can with what you have, doing the best that you can with what you have, living the best that you can with what you have, and expressing those values which are important to you. For me, my most important change when I started developing alternative values, I'll give you a quick synopsis. I grew up in a very upper middle class neighborhood in Miami. I was a part of the whole South Beach fashion world and was a model and dated models and drove a convertible and went out in limousines. And several years later, my life, my perspective changed. This was wrong. I knew it was wrong while I was doing it. Not only did I know it was wrong while I was doing it, my inner guidance system kept pushing me in a direction to pull me away from that. And I finally allowed my spirit to guide me. And when I finally allowed my spirit to guide me, my entire value system changed. It was all about integrity. It was about being honest with myself. It was about, who cares about titles? Who cares about awards? Who cares about homes and cars and status? For me, and as you know, the work that I've done over the last 8 years has been about me expressing myself, me being honest with who I am, with my identity, with who I feel I am in this place and time. And that will change. That's the other thing we must be aware, is that alternative values, the idea of alternative values does change as you change. What once worked for you even last year may not work for you today. A good example, 2 years ago, a year ago, I thought I was a libertarian, and I was, very much so. I don't want anything to do with political parties anymore. I don't care. They're all crazy as far as I'm concerned. They're all playing the game that has been imposed and thrust upon humanity in this controlling matrix by the global elite. I no longer choose to align myself with parties, organizations, people, work, economic paradigms and structures, educational systems that align themselves with this controlling matrix structure that we've allowed ourselves to be imposed upon us here on this planet. So yeah, little by little, your values will change. Or maybe it'll be a lot, who knows? We all have our epiphany moments, that I agree. We have our moments of epiphany when we say, aha, now I get it. But at the same time, while we get the aha, now I get it, we also have these little inkling changes that happen over days, over months. And one day you realize you are so far from where you were a year before, 2 years before, that the idea that your story, and we're going to talk about the story after the break, but your story changes. Your story changes, and that which you thought you were no longer is who you feel you are today. And let that happen. And I think that's the most important thing, is you need to let change happen. We value our identities way too much. I teach a weekly class here in Roanoke, Virginia. I do something called Earth Spirit, and we do meditation work, healing work. We have discussions on politics and spirituality and chemtrails and the Illuminati and whatnot. And anyway, it's a weekly meeting. It's my local G.I.C. group, for lack of a better term. And one of the things that I notice with when we do a meditation group is when I ask the participants, I ask them, well, what was it like for you? What was the experience of telling your mind that your thoughts don't matter? When we, for those of you that understand meditation, for me means going between the thoughts and just letting your thoughts be and not paying any attention to them. Thoughts are going to go through your mind while you're meditating, but just don't pay attention to them. And when I ask them, they're like, oh, no, my thoughts are saying, no, you have to listen to me. You have to listen to me. And I explain to them that's the ego. The ego is your false identity. The ego is the false identity which is constantly going to fight you every step of the way to try to prove to you that it is the most important thing, that old identity of being, I don't know, a Republican from Texas or a Democrat from Massachusetts or a Latino from Texas and California with Native American traits or whatever, all these labels, identity. It's all a farce. This nationalism, this aligning with labels is a farce. We must remember, this is the point of our humanity, when we must start to remember we are beyond our ego. The ego is an illusion. And like the Buddha says, Lord of my ego, you are merely an illusion, you do not exist. And how we must be open to change within ourselves and to change our story as we see fit, and not as we see fit necessarily, but as it changes. So many times we find ourselves stuck in a particular paradigm of who we were. I was this. There's nothing worse to me, and I feel very, very great empathy and compassion for those. A great example, a 50-year-old man who is still clinging to his, his undefeated high school football thing, or the Al Bundys of the world, for lack of a better term. Oh well. When I was in high school, I did that, and they cling to this identity. They feel that they are still that person. That is their identity. That is the best that they were, and that's not true. The best of who we are is who we are right now, and the attributes and integrity associated with who we are right now. We all have a story. And when you say to somebody, and I'm sure when you meet someone new or you're dating someone new, you have a story that you share with them. This is who I am. This is what I was. It's very strange for me as someone in the public eye. People ask me for my bio, and I have to write a bio, or someone will write a bio for me, and I'll read it, and I'll be like, yeah, well, that's a perspective. I mean, how do you create a story for yourself, and why would you create a story for yourself? And I understand that we need that to perhaps communicate who we are to others who are interested in our past, but who are we today, I feel, is what matters. So many times, and I look at this, speaking of alternate values, when we look at the political world, let's say, and I'm not saying that perhaps it's not justified that the person who's running for president was a drug dealer in high school, and we should know about that. But the reality of it is that they got caught selling pot when they were in 10th grade. I don't see how that is going to affect their ability to 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 be elected to be a leader. I find that childish. I find that so low vibration. I find it to be so not who we want to be as a society. Do we want to be concerned with our past? Do we want to be concerned with our story? And if if we are, why are we concerned with that story? So the point I'm trying to make here is that we must give ourselves permission to move beyond our personal story. Our personal story is just that. It's a story. It is not reality. It is not what is happening right now. It is not your future. It is not what you're intending to be your future, unless it is so repetitive that you are literally in rethinking and repeating that story over and over again. You're creating it to be your future. If your story is that in the past you were very poor, or in the past you were a drug addict, and if you keep telling yourself that you're a poor drug addict, what are you going to become? You're going to become a poor drug addict. That's not who you are today. That's not who you are this moment. This is not where we need to be if we are to move and transcend beyond this idea of the controlling paradigm. Why impose the restrictions upon ourselves is that point. I saw something very interesting on the chat room right now, and it was referring to the idea of revolution, the revolution, and I couldn't agree more. I'm paraphrasing now because I believe it's moved out from my eyesight, but I will say that the idea that a lot of these revolutions that we're seeing are controlled is very, very reasonable to believe. It feels as if it's a social engineered experiment to get the reaction or a rise out of society. And in fact, the real revolution, actually, here it is. Only your interpersonal revolution will do. Thank you, Sky. Only your interpersonal revolution will do. We must change from the inside. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier, that if we decide and begin to act in a way that is non-compliant with the social programming, when we begin to turn our back on the social engineering, when we begin to turn our back on the way the media tells us that we need to be, when we stop reacting to what the media tells us, then we have begun the inner revolution. Then we have begun to move beyond the controlling matrix. Then we have become empowered and are moving toward creating a greater example for those around us. It's funny how still, after all of these years, speaking of social engineering, here's a great example. After all of these years, the media and the politicians still use the same words, the same topic words that will get a rise out of you, whether it be socialist, abortion, gays, race. Everyone gets a rise out of those words still after all these years. And they've been using it for what, 50, 60, 70 years? But yet we still continue to react, and we still continue to allow ourselves to fall for the social engineering, which they intended to create divisiveness among us as a people. Do you not realize that when you say you hate gay people, or you hate black people, or you hate abortion clinics, or you hate anything, that you are just literally repeating something you were told to say? Do we not realize that many, many times when we are saying things that are divisive, they come from somebody else, whether it be media or parents or society? We've learned them. Hatred is learned. Divisiveness is learned. And many times, unfortunately, it is learned subconsciously. When in all reality, all we truly want to be, all how we truly want to live is united as a people. Isn't that what activism is all about? Isn't that what truth is all about? Isn't that what consciousness is all about? To live united as a people, as a movement of humanity. We all have a purpose on this planet. All of us have a purpose on this planet, and whether we choose to align with that purpose or not is up to us. How do you find your purpose on this planet? How do I find my purpose on this planet? Well, I know how I found my purpose on this planet, but I can share with you how you find your purpose on this planet is to remove the social engineering programming that you have subconsciously aligned yourself with. Did he just say that I've been programmed? Did he just say I've been brainwashed? We all are to an extent, including myself. How many times have you started singing a jingle from a commercial and not even realized the last time you heard it? Or you can't get a song out of your head from your days in middle school? You know, how many times have you said things over and over in your head over and over again and not realize where it comes from? We all have a bit of programming within us. We all have a bit of brainwashing within us. But it is when we are aware, when we become aware of the dynamic and the, how shall we say, the way that it's done, the way that we react. Again, this is all about reaction. Think about the way you react. It's that simple. Just think about the way you react. I know I am not thrilled with the current political system. I know I'm not thrilled with the current economic system. But when I see something on Facebook or I get an email or I read a post or a newspaper, which I really don't do much these days, the way I react shows me how much I've invested or have allowed myself to invest in that particular energy. How much have I allowed myself to invest in something that really has no effect over me? A couple of days ago, I was at a convenience store, and the woman behind the counter says to me, "Well, what do you think about this Ebola?" I was like, well, I personally feel that the media is overcompensating. They like to keep people in fear, and it's just another example of fear pornography on the media. Until I see the ambulances carrying bodies out from my neighborhood, I'm not really going to be concerned about it. Oh no, you must be aware. At least be aware. I said, of course I'm aware. I'm aware of it. I've read the one or two articles which I have given myself permission to take into my being, to allow myself to look at that one or two so I can understand perhaps where it came from and how it's coming from. But as far as to react to it and to change the way that I live, I'm not going to give it that much power over me, especially knowing what I know and knowing what has been done throughout the ages, throughout the decades. These last several decades has been a great example of that. Anything from swine flu to anthrax. I'm not going to run out and get an Ebola vaccine. That's what they want me to do. I find it to be ridiculous. I think it's time that we start aligning with the fact instead of living in this make-believe world that because everyone is talking about it, it makes it real. That's called propaganda. Propaganda is something being repeated and repeated and repeated, and the next thing you know, everyone you know is repeating it and repeating it and repeating it. That's propaganda. Ebola's coming. War is coming. The end of the world is coming. The Muslims are evil. Gay agenda. Fill in the blank, fill in the blank, fill in the blank. Repeated, 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 repeated. The next thing you know, you begin to believe it. All of that repetition is a form of brainwashing. All of that repetition is a form of propaganda, and you must turn your back on it. I haven't had a television in my house now, geez, for almost 8 years. Everyone's like, well, how do you stay informed? How do you stay informed? How do I stay informed? I choose what my sources of information are. And my sources of information does not come from basic cable or expanded cable or from Cox or Comcast or Time Warner. My information does not come from the corporations that want and have enslaved the mentality of a billion people, if not more. How do you remain informed? I have not watched the news on purpose in 2 years. Prior to that, I was a Democracy Now! Addict. I happen to like Democracy Now! I don't like to watch it, though, every day because it's never good news. Never good. Even the non-corporate stuff isn't good news, I like, people ask me, what do I like? I like Democracy Now! I like Vice News, of course, Tim Pool, who's awesome. I love We Are Change, Luke Rakowski. People that are on the ground, people that are there, people that are interacting, activist news. I like RT, but, RT is a corporatized version of activist news. But it's entertainment. RT is entertainment activist news. It's the activist version of MSNBC. Don't get me wrong. I prefer it. But I'm not going to react to what I see, on it. Many of the things that we perceive as an emergency or an alert have nothing to do with us on a day-to-day level. It's when we begin to take responsibility for our consciousness. It's when we begin to take responsibility for our thoughts. Yes, that's a very big responsibility. Taking responsibility for your thoughts. How do we do that? Well, I have about 500 hours worth of information on that, and you can find that on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/JustBernard. But taking responsibility for your thoughts means that you're owning your thoughts. It means that you're not reacting to stimuli. You're not being a Pavlovian dog drooling when Alex Jones yells, the tanks are coming, the tanks are coming. You're not drooling as a Pavlovian dog when the news says Ebola's coming, Ebola's coming. You're not being a Pavlovian drooling dog when someone who you don't know is broadcasting from where you don't know, is saying something that you may not know anything about, and you're not really aware of the information. You yourself haven't had the ability to research what they're telling you. Don't be the Pavlovian dog. When the bell rings, you don't need to drool. There's no reason for it. There's absolutely no reason for it. Again, the revolution begins within you. The revolution begins with you saying, this is a matrix. This is a controlling matrix. I am not going to be a part of it. Now, let me share something else, though. This does not mean, and I went through this a few years ago, this does not mean that you can't go out to dinner with your friends and laugh and have a good time. This does not mean that you can't, watch a sci-fi movie on Netflix and enjoy it. This does not mean you cannot participate in life itself. I find that is the opposite extreme. Many of us have chosen not to be a part of the matrix. That's fine. But it doesn't mean you don't have to live. It doesn't mean you can't have fun. It doesn't mean you can't go to that Christmas party with your wife or your husband or your partner and get drunk and have a great time and wear a lampshade on your head over the weekend. Have a good time. Life is about love. Life is about fun. Life is about being happy. I had a very good conversation with, I don't know how many of you know, Anelia Benz from the old, what is it, Project Camelot, Project Avalon. Anelia was interviewed with them a couple times, and she's been a very good friend of mine for several years, and I interviewed her a week ago or so. And I said to her, I said, well, what's the most important thing about creating this new paradigm? We keep talking about creating this new paradigm, creating this new paradigm. Yes, the revolution, the revolution, the revolution. Well, what is a revolution? And she said, make it your goal to be happy for 80% of the day. I was like, what? Your goal should be to be happy 80% of the day. Like, that doesn't sound very activisty to me. Yeah, it is being an activist. You're turning your back on the matrix. It doesn't mean not to be aware. It doesn't mean not to take action. But if you are happy 80% of the day, think about this. If you are happy 80% of the day, you literally have proven that they, quote unquote, have lost. The fearmongers, the warmongers, the economic pirates, whether you're rich, whether you're poor, no matter where you are, no matter what news is on cable, no matter what the latest outbreak is, no matter what the latest, protest is, you're happy. You're happy 80% of the time. Good for you. Good for you. Be happy. Life is about happiness. No matter what your religion, no matter what spirituality you align with, no matter what you label yourself with, I do firmly believe that our time here on this planet, I firmly believe that our experiences here on this planet are not to be unhappy, are not to be frustrated, are not to be angry or to ridicule or be ridiculed. I believe it's to be happy, to enjoy our lives, to enjoy the planet, to enjoy nature, to enjoy humanity, to enjoy feeling good, to enjoy a higher consciousness. There's nothing wrong with being an activist who's happy. People always think that activists have to be angry. I used to kid around when I was very involved in the truth movement. Not so much anymore, but I used to say I'm not an angry truther. I don't want to be an angry truther. I want to be a happy person, and I want you to be happy. It doesn't mean we can't change ourselves. It doesn't mean we can't change the planet. Why would I be unhappy to change the planet? I'd be very happy to change the planet. Of course it makes me happy to change the planet.